Oh yeah, you missing Sam? Probably. Well, welcome everybody tonight. Tonight should be interesting. We are very interested in tonight's subject. It's the Leonardo da Vinci exhibit is coming to the is at the Franklin Institute, and we have always heard a story, a connection with Leonardo da Vinci and Lukens, and of course it's what how does this happen? And tonight is really what we're going to do is we're going to go into that. Skip is here, and he worked on that with the Milan Horse project, and so the armatures inside. It's a fascinating project. I'm looking forward to learning more about it as well. So tonight we're going to talk about Kristen's here to talk about the Franklin Institute and the exhibit, and it's a really interesting, fascinating exhibit. And then we'll talk about the Milan Horse. The one thing about Leonardo is that we can relate here is that the Lukens Historic District, as we try and create programming and a safe environment where people can come and learn, and how does innovation and how does change occur, where do these great ideas come from, and how do they get applied to modern day practice. So here we definitely we have a history of steel making, but we also have a future that is trying to create an educational environment. And so tonight we're very interested in learning about Leonardo and then again the Milan Horse. So do you have anything to start?
Covered everything. Yeah. I would like to introduce Kristen Pauls. She's the exhibit and program developer at the Franklin Institute and the collections manager. We've had a few emails back and forth, and we're very excited to have her tonight.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Glad you could all make it out tonight. I'm just going to go through the exhibit that we're very lucky to host right now. It's called Leonardo da Vinci's Workshop, and it comes to us straight from Italy. The group that created it is called Leonardo 3, and they're out of Milan. And you're lucky enough, we just announced we're holding it for another week. So the closing date will actually be May 29th. So it will be the Sunday Memorial Day weekend. So you have an extra week to come down and check it out if you want to. So I'm just going to walk through the exhibit with you to give you an idea of what we have and talk a little bit about Leonardo. These are the three curators we worked with for this exhibit. This is, and please pardon me, I might butcher their Italian names. So, Edoardo Zanin, right here. In the middle is Massimiliano Lisa, and at the end is Mario Teti. They make up the core of L3. L3 stands for Leonardo 3, and what they're interested in doing is taking their engineering background, their computer programming background, their art backgrounds, and their business backgrounds, and combining them to create an organization that researches Leonardo and his drawings and his notebooks, takes his notebooks and put them into computers so that they are rendered through AutoCAD programs, computer-assisted drafting programs, creating models either to actual scale or just scale models of these drawings of Leonardo so we could actually see how they would work in real life while using the types of materials that Leonardo would have used that would have been available at Leonardo's time during the Renaissance in Italy and France. So they're the creators of this fantastic exhibit that we have. Now, a little bit about Leonardo. You probably know him as the typical Renaissance man. He certainly was very proficient in art. He was born in 1452 in Vinci, hence the name Leonardo da Vinci. He was apprenticed in a painter's workshop. Part of this is because he actually was, his parents were not married. He was a product of an affair. So he couldn't pursue professionalized training because of that. So therefore he was apprenticed to an artist studio where he worked in Florence until he was able to break out on his own, where he moved to Milan. He worked for the Duke of Milan for a while. And from there, he moved to Venice. He worked in Venice. He was able to go back to Florence and Milan a little bit towards the end of his life. And then his final stop was in France when he worked for the King of France, Francis I. And that is where he passed away. He also at that time had an apprentice named Vasari. So he started out as an apprentice, and then he ended up having an apprentice who was luckily enough able to capture his notebooks when he passed away and keep them, and that's how we know about these fantastic machines and imaginative designs that Leonardo came up with. So you're particularly going to talk about this large horse. This was something that Leonardo was commissioned to do. I won't go into too much detail because you'll be hearing more about it later. But we do have in the exhibit at the Franklin Institute a 3-foot bronze cast of model on loan from the Vivci Science Center over in Allentown. They have some of the pieces that were used to create the horse for the Milan project that you'll hear more about, and were kind enough to donate or lend us one for the run of the show, so you can, if you come see it, you can get up close and personal and see the really great details on this horse. Now, as I mentioned, L3 was really interested in bringing Leonardo's ideas to life. During his lifetime, Leonardo did not necessarily actually create all of the things that he drew. These ideas come from notebooks that he kept, just as today's designers, engineers, or artists would keep notebooks, jot down ideas, think about different ways you could put something together, and that's what we have. So they're taking these notebooks and putting together an idea of what might have been had Leonardo been had the money to create it, had someone commission it and actually create it, had certain wars and other political tensions within Italy not been present to prevent him from creating these things. So this example, we show how in the exhibit we have a model. That one happens to be a 2-scale model, 1-to-1 scale. They also have a computer monitor that comes with every model in the exhibit that shows the drawing, the original drawing from Leonardo, as well as the AutoCAD drawing that L3 did that you can pop out, you can spin around, you can look at it in more detail. And then also they have the original drawings from Leonardo, so you can see close up what that's like with supplementary graphics to describe how the machine works. So this machine in particular is a self-propelling cart. If it's familiar to you, in the past it's been referred to as Leonardo's car, but their research shows that the scale of this was actually much smaller. Again, this is a 1-to-1 scale, so you can see about 2-foot case there. It's not really big enough to be a car to carry humans. So with their research, and they looked into how it was run, it has a large spring in the center that can be wound up and let go, but Leonardo included an escapement device on that spring, so it would be a uniform force that would come out of that spring instead of a quick unwind. And so L3 postulates that this is actually for theater, that this is an automata, an automated cart that could be used in theater, that you put something on it, fasten it down, set the direction, wind the coil, and then something would mysteriously move across the stage on its own volition, which during the Renaissance era would have been quite amazing. Again, here you can see the touchscreen. In addition to showing the original drawings and the AutoCAD drawings that L3 used to create the models, they also have a great game for kids or adults to play, where you could put together the machine, and it really breaks down how there's different parts to a machine, and the different parts have to go together and work together in a certain tray to create the final product. So it also helps lead you through the thought process of designing or engineering something. So it's a great, educational tool. Now here's another model. This is a paddle boat that was come out of the Codex Atlanticus. It was drawn around 1487. The idea here is that it transfers motion from the pedals, you can sort of see in the middle, to the paddles on the outside of the boat. So here he's sort of stepping ahead and thinking about paddle boat technology and how he can make that most efficient. He tried to figure out how he can make the weight of the paddles light enough that they weren't hard to turn, but sturdy enough that they would still generate a forward motion for the boat. I mentioned that drawing came from the Codex Atlanticus. As I mentioned before, Leonardo had a bunch of notebooks, as many engineers, artists, designers have, and that's what comes down to us. And what happened to those notebooks is he passed away, his apprentice kept them in his house, stored them away in the attic. would let certain people who knew they existed come see them. Over time, they got passed down to the family. Parts of them left. They got stolen. They got moved around. And so they disseminated all around the world to different places. It also meant that they aren't in order anymore. So what we know now, as for example, the Codex Atlanticus, might not necessarily be the way Leonardo created it or drew it, because it's the sheets that have been put together, and where it has landed, they're keeping it together as one book, but the sheets might have been made across a different time period, not necessarily in order. So part of the work that L3 did was to look through all of his notebooks and really try and draw together, well, over here's a drawing in red pencil that looks like it's the same gearing system as this drawing from this notebook in the same type of red pencil. Maybe they actually go together even though they're in different libraries in different countries and haven't been put together that way since perhaps Leonardo. So Codex Atlanticus in particular is in Milan, Italy, and this is where L3 got their start by looking through this and taking all of the drawings on it and again putting it to the computer into AutoCAD. This one was so named because when the library who has it housed it, they put it in these large pages that were used normally for maps or atlases, and so that's how it got the name Atlanticus. Here is the harpsichord viola, another really interesting design from Leonardo that showed his innovation and his ability to combine different ideas and take them to a new level. This is worn by the player, and you can't see it in this photo, but there's actually a keyboard, like a piano or harpsichord keyboard, that the player would play. And down here is something that hooks around your leg, so you can keep beat with it, and as you're moving your leg, that moves a flywheel that keeps a bow that's inside moving across the strings. So while you play it like you would a piano, it sounds like a violin or a harpsichord and viola as they would have been at the time. So it's a very innovative way, interesting idea of having the musician wear it and his own movement, giving the power to it, combining different types of instruments. Again, just showing Leonardo's innovativeness. We also have manuscript B. This is stored in a library in Paris. And this is another manuscript, again, that L3 went through and took all the drawings and put it into AutoCAD and really studied it. And so you can go and you could flip through the entire manuscripts on the computer, the originals, Leonardo's, as well as the reproduction from L3 while you're in the exhibit. This is another amazing machine from Leonardo. This is his mechanical lion from the Codex Madrid. This is something that we had heard about through our archival sources. We knew that there had been an event at which a mechanical lion dropped lilies at the feet of the King of France, King Francis I. L3 went through and pieced together different bits and pieces of drawings from these notebooks and came up with this mechanical lion, which is run by a spring engine again in the center, with pulleys that connect to the linkages that create the legs. So it would walk down the aisle, stop in front of the King of France, and then open its mouth or open its chest cavity, and the lilies would fall out at the feet of the King of France. So, and again, this is the way L3 is working this. We know that this was made, but we don't know if it looked like this. This is L3 using their engineering background, looking at Leonardo's stuff, sort of hypothesizing what it might have been. Leonardo didn't just make machines. He also had thought exercises. So this was one of his thought exercises to just play around with geometry. So they create a model of that. And you can just see the way he's thinking about this then leads him to help think about the geometry of other machines he makes. This is the multi-cannon gunship. This is another one that L3 has a different interpretation for. In the past, we thought this was something that went on top of a tower, but L3 looked at it and thought that it's really heavy. It's got 16 cannons on it. How are you going to carry 16 cannons up to a tower with all of this machinery? And thought that maybe it was actually meant for water. Maybe it was actually meant to go in the harbor. They found drawings of this paddle mechanism where the two paddles are actually independent. So depending on how you turn them controls the ship. And so if you turn them opposed to each other, the ship would make a full circle and would be able to fire those 16 cannons, boop, 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 right after each other, which, again, at the time would have been a pretty revolutionary war machine. He also created other war-type machines. This one was more for a theatrical effect. It's his robot soldier from the Codex Atlanticus again. This soldier has a pulley system, so there's a big pulley in its chest that connects to another pulley system that would be external, that would cause it to beat its hands on its chest, making a loud noise. The idea would be there would be a circle of these in the turret of a castle. The enemy comes up, sees all these soldiers beating their chests, becomes afraid, and hopefully does not attack, even though they're all just wooden props with the armor put on them. Now, L3 also worked on some visualizations of his artwork, Leonardo's artwork. He's probably most known for The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. In fact, he didn't produce that many artworks during his lifetime, and a lot of them he left unfinished. So he's much more of a designer or engineer than he was an artist, although for us we really see the art, and certainly they were thought of as one and the same at the time. So L3 has gone through and tried to, through computer technology, take The Last Supper back to what they think it would have looked like when it was first painted in 1494. They also have his self-portrait here from 1515, and part of what they've done is created this special computer program called Hyperview. They've scanned this in at 88 megapixel resolution, so you can see things that you can't see with your naked eye through the magnification on the digital screen. So it lets you experience the portrait in a different way than you would if you saw it live. Also included in the exhibit are folio drawings. They aren't originals of Leonardo, but they were ones made, I believe the ones you're looking at right here were made in the 1930s. In folios that would have been published and sent to libraries or museums around the world to learn about Leonardo. Another thing Leonardo was really into was flight, heavier than air flight. How do we get man in the air? This, if you recognize it, it might be because in the past it's been referred to as his helicopter. L3, upon looking at it, believed that actually this was more of a study piece to look at how air reacts to things. There's a spring in the center. Again, you would just rotate it around the spring, let it go, and it would go up and fly back down, rather like a whirligig or a maple tree seed. And this was, again, for Leonardo just to start learning about what happens when things are going through the air, especially in a screw-type motion. It would not, engineering studies, I mean, it would not be able to hold any thing or person, and it also couldn't really function as a helicopter per se, so that's part of why L3 believed maybe it was more for study. This is his mechanical bat. He was very interested in mechanically recreating what he was finding in animals, for example, in a bat. If he can mechanically recreate with wood where there would have been bones, with cloth, what the bat's actual anatomy was, then he was hoping he could figure out how to create heavier than air flight. So this one, for example, there would be a rider up front and it would function much like a hang glider would today. This is another study he did. Again, he built some of these types of models just to study what would happen just the same way that engineers and designers do today. This is a model, obviously, of a bird. And what he used this for was to really study where the center of gravity was on the bird, because he had figured out that where your center of gravity was will affect how you can fly. And so he's trying to figure out how that works on a bird so he could recreate it for a flying machine. So really this taught him about how to control pitch. Again, most of the stuff on flight is from the Codex on Flight, which is also in a library in Italy, where he collected a lot of stuff about how birds function, how bats function, again, how different seeds or leaves might float through the air, as he's just trying to gather how are things in nature flying, so he can figure out how to make something mechanical fly. To that end, he created what he called the Great Kite. Again, this is in the Codex of Flight. He discussed not just the design of how to design this in these notebooks, but there are also notes on what kind of materials needed to be used. You couldn't use metal, it would be too heavy. Everything had to be wood, lightest wood possible. So he was also thinking about not just the mechanical design of it, but also the types of materials and how materials affect these things. This is just the cupola where the pilot would sit. The final would have a wingspan of 52.5 feet, so we couldn't fit it in the exhibit. But that's a pretty large machine, and of course the wingspan would have to be that large to help create the wing load that would actually lift something up. It was built for the wing surface to be 360 square feet. So if you put a 200-pound man in there to fly it, L3 estimated it'd be about 705 pounds, which would give it a wing load of 1.3 pounds per square foot. So that would be less even than a glider today.
Was he using that as a glider, or did he have a...
Well, the way it worked is that the pilot could actually maneuver things as they were sitting in the cupola. So he could move his angle of the feet, and that would
That could control.
move the so that would
But he's
move the
gotta
wings.
Get it up in the air to...
Yeah.
somehow.
Yes, and we don't know how he thought to do
Alright,
that.
yeah.
We do know he could move the wings. He actually, part of what the plan was that you could flap the wings as well, which we now know is not the way to go about it. But at the time, again, he's looking at birds, he's looking at bats, he's thinking about how they flap their wings. So you can also pull the wings this way or move them that way through a complicated set of pulley systems in order to fly. Again, we have no record that he ever made this. This is just from drawings they pieced together.
Yeah.
We knew he was very interested in it. So L3 created these models of his machines so we can look at it and get a better feel for his great ingenuity in engineering and design. Again, as I said, we have an extra week of it, which is great, so you have some more time to get down there and see it if you'd like. I brought some ticket information. It's during the day from 9:30 to 5 p.m., last entry at 3:30, and that's $24.50. That gets you entrance to the show, as well as our whole science center and our planetarium. Seniors, 62 over, you get a $1 savings, and if you bring me the little ones, that's only $17.50. But in the evening, if you only want to see Leonardo, it's open in the evenings from 5 to 8:30 on Friday and Saturday nights. With the last entry at 7, and that's only $10. And if you're a member, you should be able to get tickets for free. So we do hope that you'll be able to come down and see this great exhibit and learn a little bit more about Leonardo's ingenuity and his brilliant designs.
Very interesting fellow.
Thank you, Kristen, and I hope that everyone who came today put their name in the hat to enter to win 2 tickets to this Leonardo da Vinci's workshop. And I'm now very proud to present Skip Kralik. He is a sculptor, and he was also the media liaison for the Leonardo's Horse Project. I had the privilege to meet him about 2 weeks ago, and he is a great example here where something comes up like the Leonardo's workshop, and we think, oh, well, Lukens did something for Leonardo da Vinci's horse in Milan. Well, let's ask the question, well, what exactly did we do? And we asked the question and we put it out there, and usually we get our answer, and this time our answer came in the form of Skip, so I will let him share the answer with all of you.
That was good, by the way. Very good. I didn't get a chance to meet you, but I want to tell a little story first. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I normally talk about an hour, hour and a quarter, and they said you not too much past a half hour. So I'm going to do my best to cut this thing down. But I want to tell you a story of 2 people, Leonardo and Charles C. Dent. At one point, Leonardo was commissioned to build a horse for the Duke of Milan. He wrote an elaborate letter that said to the Duke, I can do anything you want, including if you want a monument, I'll do it. The idea was the Duke of Milan would have his father on on the back of the horse, and it would be a life-size bronze monument, much like many of the Renaissance monuments of the time. Once he started working on this monument by sketching the horses that the Duke had in his stables and gathering together drawings and ideas and concepts, at one point the Duke said to him, "I have a lot of money. I want a horse that's twice life size. Can you do that?" Leonardo said yes, started making some modifications. At this point, he didn't know what exact design he was going to do, which is why, as you see many drawings of Leonardo of his horses, they're almost always different. Eventually, the Duke came back and said, 3 times life size, the biggest horse in the world. Can you do it? Of course, Leonardo would say, I can do it. This modified his thinking quite a bit, however, because this is no small engineering feat to do a horse that is essentially 24 feet tall. I mean, it's monumental. As he worked on this project, he got drawn off by all kinds of other projects that the Duke wanted him to work on in Milan. He was creating stages for theaters and all kinds of stuff. And sometimes the Duke would stop paying him and Leonardo would stop working. So, you know, this project went on for a lot of years. And eventually what happened was Leonardo got as far as selecting a final drawing, creating a 24-foot clay horse in I don't want to say a pasture, I guess it was more like an orchard outside of the city of Milan. He was given a space, he was given a work crew, and that's where they created. Leonardo didn't do the whole clay horse himself, he had a lot of assistants. But they built a full-scale 24-foot clay horse, which became the talk of Italy and later the talk of many other scholars across Europe. Unfortunately, as he got ready to cast this thing, they pulled molds. You have to, of course, pull molds off of this so that you can cast, then put the molds back together and pour your bronze. Leonardo even designed the casting process because he wanted to try something that had never been done before, a monolithic pour. He wanted to cast the whole horse at once. And the way he was going to do it is dig a real deep hole, turn the horse mold upside down, put it in the ground, heat it with a ring of furnaces, and pour bronze through the 4 legs, down through the chin, down through the tail, and down, let it go down into the, yeah, it was a staggering idea, which modern engineers tell us wouldn't work, by the way, because your bronze starts to cool, you don't get the correct flow and so forth. But it was an incredible idea. Then they discovered the water table in Milan is too high and you would wind up digging yourself into water. So then he wanted to lay the horse on its side and still come up with casting like this. What happened was Louis XII invaded Milan. I don't want to say conquered Milan, the history's kind of fuzzy about that, but anyway, Leonardo had to give up on the project. The Duke had to give up on in fact, I think the Duke was captured for a short time. They had to give up on the project. Leonardo went off to do other things, eventually, as you heard, ending up in France. The molds actually had been pulled off the clay, but the archers coming through, the French archers, used the horse for target practice and shot chunks of it off, and eventually it just degraded from the weather, disappeared. No evidence of this 24-foot clay horse. Oddly enough, the molds disappeared. Now these are great big hunks of, they're big. No one knows where they were stored or what happened to them. They just disappeared into the folds of history. Okay?
What were the molds made of, you know?
They would have been plaster, clay and plaster molds of some sort with some sort of reinforcement on it.
Yeah, they had to have.
They have, because they're heavy.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the end of the sad story of the horse. But scholars continue to refer to this great horse. There are writings from Europeans of the time period. Some had traveled to Milan to see it, etc. The whole project died. Now we're going to come all the way up to 1977. Charles C. Dent, a retired airline pilot for United Airlines and an art collector his whole life. He had amassed a collection of Renaissance bronzes, some medieval bronzes, medieval wooden carvings, all kinds of eccentric pieces that he bought his whole life because he never married, never had any children. He put all his money into his art collection. So he amassed quite an extraordinary collection. He was from Allentown, Pennsylvania. He bought a farmhouse in Fogelsville, Pennsylvania, just a little to the west. Bought a little farmhouse with a barn, retired there to work on his art collection and enjoy himself. He brought much of the art back on the planes that he flew. He was a 747 pilot, and there was always room somewhere to tuck in another bronze sculpture. Although several times he told me it was behind his pilot seat in the cabin. You know, I mean, he'd wrap it up and toss it in there and bring it home from wherever his travels were. Anyway, he's sitting in his living room in his farmhouse in Fogelsville one day reading some back issues of National Geographic. You know how they get passed around? Well, his brother dropped off a whole pile of these things. In 1977, September issue of National Geographic, you can look this up, they did a 25-page story on Leonardo da Vinci, including 2 pages on the horse. They called it The Horse That Never Was. Charlie, sitting in his living room, gets the idea that someone should finish this horse project. Why not build the horse? And the really remarkable thing is he had a second thought and give it to Italy, which makes it a tremendously extraordinary project. I want to build this thing, then I want to give it away. Now, I don't have the time to tell you about all the other projects that Charlie did in his lifetime. He was one of these movers and shakers. When he got an idea, he would get it done. He even helped co-found the Business Council for the United Nations, but that's a whole other story. So he decides that someone should do it. He should be the one. He's retired. He has the time. He has the interest. He has a lot of the knowledge. He could match wits with curators at art museums as far as knowledge. So he sets about asking the question, is it possible? Because he's a retired airline pilot, he gets free tickets. You know, you can fly all over the place. You just put in your bid. So he starts flying around, contacting scholars and flying around and asking, is it possible? And he eventually talks to Dr. Carlo Pedretti out at UCLA, the leading expert on Leonardo in this country. He meets him, flies out to California, meet him, says, is it possible? And Dr. Pedretti says there are enough drawings left. He never left the final blueprint, but there's enough material. It's scattered all over, but there's enough of it. And we have reproductions of all the drawings. Yes, you could come up with a very close approximation of Leonardo's horse, what he wanted to do with it, by kind of an amalgamation. So Charlie sets off on this essentially crazy scheme to build the world's biggest horse and send it to Italy. He establishes the headquarters at his house, of course. He decides that he's got to sculpt a model. So he drives the zoning board crazy out where he lives by creating a 50-foot diameter, 50-foot high geodesic dome out in the middle of the cornfields of Fogelsville. He had to battle through the zoning commission to get this done because it's not right angles and square corners and we can't build this thing. But he eventually gets it halfway under construction. He has started already soliciting money because he's going to have a nonprofit organization that will construct this horse. I'm trying to shorten this somehow. He hires a sculptor by the name of Garth Herrick from Philadelphia. He's a painter, actually, more than a sculptor, fresh out of school, art school. And Charlie gets the dome about halfway done, just about when he hires, a little before he hires Garth. And he's talking to a foundryman one day, and the foundryman says, Charlie, you don't need to build a 24-foot model inside your dome. See, that's why he built it. It's clear span, right? He figured no pillars. He said, you don't need a 24-foot model. You build us an 8-foot model. We enlarge it. That's what foundries do. He says, okay. So he just finishes the dome and lined the entire inside of it with his art collection, scattered all the way around, all the pedestals with his bronzes and his wooden sculptures. And in the center, he got to work on an 8-foot clay model with Garth. What happened, to cut a long story short, they went through several iterations of this 8-foot model. In 1994, Charlie took ill with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, and he went very quickly. He died on Christmas Day, 1994, actually. He left the art collection. Oh, by the way, by now it's a nonprofit organization, Leonardo da Vinci's Horse Incorporated, 501c3, with collecting funds and so forth. He's had people working for him there on this project. But Charlie left his art collection to the horse. And 2 weeks before he died, a group of us were in his living room, and Charlie knew that he was going to die. I mean, he knew it. And we stared him in the eye and we said, Charlie, we'll finish your horse. Don't worry. You don't have to die thinking that your horse won't get done like Leonardo did. So Charlie passed on Christmas Day, We called one or two other of the board members and said, are you in? Yeah, we're in. So the model progressed to the point where it seemed possible to create, send it off to the foundry. And that's where I want to start with this first photo. We sent an 8-foot plaster. Here's them making molds, actually. Would you kill the lights there, please? Thank you. Maybe one more.
Okay. Yeah,
Up
right
here?
on the front there then.
Okay. That's my job. There we go. Creating this is the inside of the dome. You see the paintings and sculpture hanging around, all wrapped around, covered in plastic because of the plaster dust. And we sent the model up to Talex Art Foundry in Beacon, New York. And, let me read this for a minute, forward. From the 8-foot model on the left, there's the 24-foot enlargement that you see.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. This is that 8-foot plaster right there. And what happened was a slow parade of experts, art experts, historians, horsemen, etc., came through, anatomists, visited the foundry because everybody had been talking, among the sculpture world, a lot of people have heard about this, and they all said the horse is not very good. And this was Charlie's work with Garth's work, with many other people's inputs, but none of them were really talented sculptors. They were amateur sculptors. And the conclusion was it's not a good enough horse to send to Italy. So we made a very difficult decision on the board of directors to destroy Charlie's horse and start all over again. It was the only way to get a horse good enough that Italy would accept. So we're taking apart the horse, and it literally got torn apart and destroyed, and we hired Nina Akamu, a very talented American sculptor, Japanese name, but American sculptor, who has done animal sculpture her entire career, specialized in horses, had studied for 12 years in Italy, reads and writes and speaks Italian, and studied the Renaissance. So we figured we had the perfect sculptor. This, by the way, on the right is Rod Skidmore, one of our board members, and that's the original model that Nina presented to say, is it good enough for you to hire me? And we said, yes, it is. So we put her to work. And she built her own 8-foot horse, 8-foot clay horse, same enlargement concept again. There you can see that the mane, there's a lot of work going on in the mane with all the curly Q Renaissance style design. Here's an 8-foot plaster being worked on. Nina's working on the leg. One of her assistants is working there. Eventually, an 8-foot plaster was created. And so this is about 8 feet tall. In other words, a life-size horse. Now, modern horsemen looking at this go, that doesn't look like a horse exactly. Something wrong with it. There's a lot wrong with it. It's a Renaissance horse, not a modern horse. And it's a Renaissance horse at the time when there were exaggerations that took place in art to emphasize certain qualities of the horse, even though they were unrealistic. Most horses don't have this short of a back. They don't have this thick of a neck. The legs are a little on the heavy side. It doesn't have a snarling face that's almost anthropomorphic, but if you look at Leonardo's drawings, you see an awful lot of that. Of course, Nina had a hard job. By day, sculptor, by night, studying Leonardo's drawings into 2 or 3 in the morning and then coming back and working the next day. But anyway, we wound up with a Renaissance Leonardo-esque horse. Short back, deep belly, rounded rear end, thick legs, heavy legs, laid back shoulder angle on the bone, arched neck, anthropomorphic head, and exaggerated musculature, which you won't really see in a real horse. Oh, I forgot, and the elaborate design of the mane. You see that in the Colleones and all the famous Renaissance horses, or either before or after, actually, this overt, elaborate design of the mane, almost as if it went to a hairdresser yesterday. So here's the finished horse. You can see the almost human eyes, the eyebrows, the snarl, the elaborate nostrils, as if it's a stallion that's mad at something. We even researched the horseshoes for her so that you got correct horseshoes from the Renaissance time, which are, by the way, different from modern horseshoes. If I had time, I'd tell you how. Now, how do you enlarge a horse? Well, this is a pantograph, a mechanical device which you've heard of from other uses, I'm sure. You lock in the model, you dial in this ratio, in this case 3:1, and you go from an 8-foot horse to a 24-foot horse by making a skeleton of it, packing it with clay, and then carving. What you do is you take this rod here and you scrape the side, and a bigger rod over here scrapes the side of the bigger model, and you transfer your motion and your movement. All by hand, very labor intensive, but it makes an incredibly accurate enlargement. This, by the way, was done in the Renaissance times. A whole lot hasn't changed in foundry work. So here we are. This is going to be the body of the horse. That's the what goes inside it. Here's the rear end of the horse sitting there, part of the rear end over here, and we're just working away. There's a whole bunch of foundry people doing this. This is not just one person. This is the Talix foundry artisans working away. Not the most elegant picture with a rear end and a set of testicles facing you, but that's the enlargement. Here's the 8-foot. Here's the big clay. And we continue to enlarge. This is the bottom of the belly, the back, the withers. There's the 8-foot there. There's a chain drive, which you can see right here. As you rotate your 8-foot model, your 24-foot rotates in exactly the same motion, so you can continue to scrape and work your way all the way around the model. Again, very labor intensive, but it works. This is the right underneath the chest, left leg, right leg. Of course, the head would come up this way, and you can see how large the enlargement is. There he is with the scraping tool right there, carving on the clay. There's the head, there's the eye, part of the mane. This is FDR's dog Fala. They were also doing the FDR sculpture that went to Washington, D.C. at the time, and it has FDR, his dog, and his wife. Not necessarily in that order, but anyway. I just put that in there because it's a great example of how the pantograph works. There's the little model that was delivered by the sculptor. Here's the big dog being scraped and carved on the pantograph machine. Just thought you'd like that. Fitting some of the pieces together by crane. Now you have to measure and compare every single part of the 8-foot to the 24-foot. So they started getting some very large calipers, which they could dial in the ratio, measure here, hand up to a guy and say, does it fit on the clay? And that's exactly how you start refining this model. An awful lot of handwork. Oh, you could even see, by the way, notice the some of the drawings where the muscles are outlined, because he says, here, measure that one, hand it up to me, I want to measure this one. Sometimes they had to make a giant-sized caliper. They didn't have any that big at the foundry, but they improvised to get measuring devices big enough to be able to refine this. Always, always, they kept the small pieces of the horse nearby the big ones so they could transfer the exact measurements. Had to build a scaffold almost 30 feet high, completely surrounding the horse to be able to get access from every direction. There is a belly pole holding the horse up here, which obviously won't be needed for the final horse, but it holds the model up. So this is a scaffold. There's guys crawling around. There's always a little piece of the horse there, though, to match the big one there. Fitting the head into the neck, that was a big day when they got this to see what the whole head would look like. There's Nina, very happy to see. Of course, this joint will be smoothed over and filled in with clay, and you won't see it. Hoisting the head on. And then we had a problem. The strap broke. When they got the horse head 30 feet into the air, the nylon strap broke. The head came crashing down, crashed into the neck, into the leg, and fell on its side and destroyed the whole mold, whole mane, half the chin. And fortunately, all of the people were standing around and no one got hit, because it was 3,000 pounds of clay and it would have killed anybody underneath it. It's the only foundry accident like that. They checked back for 50 years. Nothing like that's ever happened at a foundry. Somehow the strap that connects from the crane to the horse got too worn, and no one changed it, and it broke. Nina was so upset she disappeared for a week. No one could find her. We had 7 sculptor's assistants that you saw swarming all around her. We had hired 7 people to help her enlarge the horse because that's how much work there is, or she'd still be there doing it. And they, 5 of them had left now because the enlargement was done. 2 of them went back to work immediately, got a hold with the foundry people to put the horse back on the pantograph, the head back on the pantograph, and they said, we're going to get back to work and restore it. So we lost about a month of work on it. Nina eventually came back, and they finally got a hold of her and said, Nina, it's okay, we're working on it, don't worry, we can save the horse, you know. So she came back and went back to work, and so did the 2 assistants that stayed with her, and they got the horse all put back together again. By the way, Nina was afraid of heights, so every time she went way up in the scaffold, she had this elaborate OSHA harness. She looked like a marionette up there, you know, with all this harness, but she was terrified of heights. But these guys would say, Nina, you got to come up here and check something. Okay, it's 30 feet up, you know. There are all the sculptor's assistants, most of them, maybe not all of them. There's Nina speaking. We had a party. Thought it seemed right. We finished the clay model. Let's invite everybody up to Talex. It's also a fundraiser, I'll be honest. But about 450 people showed up for this open house to see the clay horse. Speeches were given, money was collected, and we were on our way to the enlargement. This gives you some sense of, if you see this guy standing here, you can get some sense of how big this horse is.
Wow.
Yeah, wow is what most people say. I do this because most people don't understand the foundry process, so I'm walking you through the whole thing. These are aluminum shims that have been stuck into the clay. They're providing parting lines for where molds will pop apart from either side. You need that separation. So all over the horse, these guys swarmed and inserted these aluminum parting plates, which allowed eventually the molds to be pulled off of it. Next step, spray the whole horse with a blue rubber silicon rubber mold material. So the entire horse was covered in about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch thick silicon rubber mold making material. And then that was covered with fiberglass to make what's called a mother mold. There's our blue horse. Oh, by the way, the blue horse is without the head because they said, we're not going to take another chance like that again. We'll do the horse down, the head down on the ground, even though they went out and bought very heavy straps for the rest of the project. This is a mother mold. It's got this inside of the blue rubber, of course, is the outside of the horse. It's not really that thick. That's where the aluminum was. And if you could see underneath, you would see fiberglass reinforcement. That's called a mother mold. And then they built little crates to hold every single one of them so they wouldn't get flexed out of position. I need to talk with my hands for a minute. Take that rubber mother mold, pour the inside of it with plaster and let it harden. And when you pop the rubber off, the outside of the plaster is now the outside of the horse. You now have a shape that you can use to make, to actually pour bronze with. So those are the final molds. This is a sand bed, the old-fashioned way of pouring, of foundry work, a sand bed. The plaster is set in there and rammed hard with the sand. A top that's the same dimension is put over it. Sand is poured in and rammed all around. And then you lift the top off. You remove the plaster. You set the top back down. And now you have a space in between the two where the plaster used to be. That's where the bronze will flow to make that piece for you. I'm oversimplifying, but that's a basic idea.
You have to have that at a certain temperature to pour that?
You do. You have to preheat the molds so that the bronze flows, yes.
That's a standard molding process.
Pretty much. It's for hundreds of years it's been that way. There's also the lost wax process, and that was used for certain parts of both the 24-foot horse and we were also making an 8-foot bronze at the same time. And some pieces are a little too intricate. It's hard to get the molds to pop off because of undercuts and curlicues. So some of the horse was done in lost wax. That is the same plaster, pour wax into there, melt the wax, and then coat it with ceramic, and then when you have a ceramic shell on both sides of the wax, melt the wax out, and the gap in between is where the bronze will flow. Again, kind of oversimplified, but it's a basic idea. Always excited to see bronze being poured, 2,200 degrees. You have to wear the moon suits or your clothes will melt off of you, from the heat. It would just melt your clothes right off. So you have to wear these protective moon suits. It's got to be poured out of there, down the hatch, and then it'll flow across in that gap that I told you about. When you let it cool and you hoist it up and you knock all the sand off, you're left with a raw bronze casting. That's about 4 feet by 6 feet and is part of the side of the horse. All this excess stuff are sprues or gates which allow bronze to flow in. They will all be cut off. So in other words, they'll make a straight cut down here and cut all that loose extra stuff off. But that's a raw bronze casting right there. Now you start putting the horse together piece by piece by piece. And it's kind of fascinating. We kept the 24-foot clay intact, so you could measure the 24-footer, then measure this. And then you started using hydraulic jacks on this thing to nudge it a little this way, push it a little that way, raise it a little this way. Meanwhile, you're tacking your joints and closing the thing in. Okay, Lukens, here we go. We got an engineering firm to figure out how to make our horse stand on 2 legs, because if you know, most horse sculptures that you ever see, Civil War sculptures, Renaissance sculptures, 3 legs for a tripod. But Leonardo's drawings seem to mainly focus toward the end on a trotting horse. That's 2 legs down, opposing legs down, the other 2 up. How do you make all of this horse stand on 2 little, and horse legs are skinny, right? So this is a real engineering challenge. The guys said, well, we can do this with modern stainless steel. They devised a plan whereby an 8-inch diameter, 1 inch thick, that's a heavy pipe, and a 4-inch thick, 3/4 inch diameter would run up the legs of the horse, inside the legs of the horse. The big, if the horse is facing that way, the big pipe is here and the small pipe is hung below it, welded to it, runs all the way up and then ties into an armature that runs inside the whole horse. So the horse appears to be standing on bronze legs. It's really standing on its armature that's inside it. But it was a hell of an engineering project. And a little before this, contacts were made with Lukens steel. I'm not even sure of who all the people were that worked on it, but somehow we came to Lukens Steel and said, would you like to donate the stainless steel that's necessary for this project and be part of this famous, well, we hope would be famous horse? The answer was yes. Just to let you know, the whole horse weighs 15 tons. 12 tons of it is bronze. 3 tons of it is stainless steel. There's a hell of a lot of stainless steel inside this horse, and it's all from Lukens. Thank you very much. See, there you can see how it, here's the small part, the small pipe, here's the big one. It bends, it follows the curve, and it goes up to a giant match plate of 1 inch thick stainless steel and a ring of heavy-duty aircraft level bolts. And that's how the legs get bolted to the horse. Another good example of the match plates with all the gussets. I mean, we're talking holding up 15 tons. This is no small engineering project. There is the armature inside. You can get about 12 to 15 people inside the horse if you want to crawl in there. All of this pipe, all of these plates are from Lukens. In fact, this is fascinating. These plates are plasma torched to the same contours of the inside of the horse. And then they're welded to the horse with a special welding rod that has the same coefficient of expansion as the bronze and the stainless so that it won't pull apart. There's some real tricky engineering going on in here. But this horse, they knew it would have to go from 20 degrees, 25 degrees in the winter to 100 degrees in the summer in the sun. You didn't want the horse expanding and contracting and popping joints loose and seams and so forth. This absolutely will not move. It will not move because of the construction of the stainless steel armature, the parent bronze, and the welding specialized welding rod that was used. I'm in awe of the way they work that out. There's a chair. There's one of the welders was sitting inside on a chair. It gives you some how big this thing is. Oh, there he is, working away. See the contour? It follows the shape of the inside, and then all these ribs connect this way, and they connect this way, and here's another rib plate across there. And here's the clay, which we kept, and the 24 being built side by side. Eventually, they had to stand it up and put it on its legs. This was a key moment. How close would the legs match on the floor compared to the legs of the clay horse? When they stood this thing, they had an elaborate grid chalked off on the bottom here and on the bottom there so that they could measure. It was in 6-inch grid blocks. When they stood the horse up and they slid it into position, it was off 1/4 of an inch is all out of all of that. And they put a hydraulic ram on the thing and went, "Rah!" and that got that 1/4 inch. Perfect, absolutely perfect. The level of craftsmanship at that foundry is hard to explain. It really is. Now you have all the pieces done. The horse has been welded together. It's been polished and ground and what have you. It eventually gets a patina, a nice brown color put on it with a heat treatment. And then you wax it, and then you're pretty much finished. What you have is a body, 4 legs, a tail, and a head. And we decided to have a party. Heard that before? We had a Bon Voyageo party. Goodbye to the horse. And we invited just anybody and everybody to come up to Beacon, and we decided we would put the horse together out on the grounds of the foundry and just let anybody come in. A 3-day event, a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then at that point, Dutchess County got involved up there, upstate New York. And they said, well, we might as well have Renaissance days, Leonardo days, we'll get the town involved, we'll have a giant party. And we said, well, geez, that's a little bigger than we expected. How many people do you think would show up? And they said, 10,000. We said, okay. So we got the horse, we rented Klieg lights, lit it at night so you could drive by and see the horse at night. And we printed up 10,000 of these information folders, and we got t-shirts and water bottles and all this stuff. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right? First of all, the horse got erected on a Tuesday, got finished on Tuesday. All night long for the next 2 nights, people drove by at night, looking at the horse, stopping, throwing open the doors, getting out, taking pictures. We finally opened the gates on Friday morning, and all 10,000 of everything we had was gone in the first half of the first day. Just gone. They just swarmed in. They were coming. I don't know where they all came from. So, of course, we ran out of everything. But we still had a party. For 3 days, we had this wonderful... People came from all over. It made the front page of the New York Times with a color photograph on Saturday. I swear to God, half of New York City came up on Sunday on the train. It was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful.
What year was this?
This was 1999 when it was finally finished. Early. While I'm talking, I should show you putting the horse together. It's really fascinating. Oh, see how you get inside the horse? Look, little hatch. You crawl in there. Eventually, that hatch will be welded shut over in Italy. This is how you do it. Put it together, piece by piece. Over 3 days, we had 50,000 people came to see the horse. We blocked up the turnpike exit. They couldn't get off Interstate 84. We had to have the fire police, everybody came out to direct traffic. We ran out of food, water, everything else. See, the horse actually stands on its match plate, not on the hoof. They welded it temporarily there. You can get inside the horse, of course. Now, when they crane this up, that guy has to duck. Notice he's not there. He's hiding because that's a very heavy horse head to swing over there. Now we're missing a tail yet. We got to put the tail on it. And just there, with a person and a tail, you get some sense of that. There's Talex's logo, by the way. And we're finishing up a horse, and there it is.
Yeah.
The first time in 500 years that anyone's seen a 24-foot bronze. Well, the first bronze one ever, and there was a clay one in Leonardo's time, but of course it got destroyed. So that's the near side, and there's the off side. And of course, you build a little platform to hide the actual support structure. So it looks like it's standing on its 2 legs, 15 tons.
Oh,
Now you got to go to Milan, right? Because that's where it's going. So of course, one of our guys goes to Alitalia in New York and says, how would you like to be the official horse airline and fly the pieces of the horse on a 747 cargo jet to Milan? They agreed. The horse was actually shipped to Chicago because that's where they had the airplane that had the logos, the fancy Alitalia logos, which they wanted to make sure was in all the video. So it got flatbedded to Chicago. Just before it left, a guy came to the cargo master came to Talex and said, I have to measure everything up. So we showed him the crates, that there's a crate that holds each of the 4 legs, a crate that holds the head and the tail and the body. He says, I got good news and bad news. The good news is the 4 legs and the head and the tail fit. The bad news is if you put that body in that crate, it won't go in the doors of the cargo jet. So we went, oh my God, what are we going to do? And he says, bubble wrap. They hoisted this thing up, wrapped it in bubble wrap and duct tape, put it through the doors, and in it went.
oh.
And they flew it to Malpensa Airport in Milan. It got trucked into the a cultural center, which was created just for the horse. The owners of San Siro racetrack in Milan said, we will carve out a section of our property and make a cultural park for the horse. That was the agreement between the city of Milan and the entity that owned the racetrack, so that's where the horse finally went, which you'll see better pictures of. But we sent Talex people to Milan to put the horse together because we said we're not going to let anybody else touch this horse. You've been working on it for 3 years, you get to put it together. So they got a trip to Italy. And then we said, find the best crane operator in all of Milan, because if he screws up, we're in trouble. And they got a wonderful crane operator who understood the delicacy of this. Notice, by the way, it's now time to actually permanently close the joints. So they get welded shut. That's bright bronze you see there. They got bolted together, but now they fill in with weld. It gets ground, it gets polished, it gets texture put on, and then of course it will eventually get patinaed so it matches, and you won't see any of the joints. Again, you see how the horse actually stands on its support. This is cast concrete, but over top, a wealthy patron in Milan donated Carrara marble for the base, the best marble you can get. So we were excited about that too. Carrara marble is going on there. At one point, the gentlemen inside the horse were close to asphyxiation there, so they ran air up into them. So they were bolting things together, and it was about 90 degrees in the sun, and inside the horse it was 120. And these guys were about ready to pass out, so they had to run some air up into there. There's 2 guys up inside the horse right now in that picture. And I guess this guy's going, are you all right up there? You know. See the guys up here waiting for the head to come over? I love that shot. Now, you got to have a celebration. So we had an unveiling. On the 10th of September, 1999, the horse got unveiled with, again, a giant celebration. 1,200 people showed up. We had all kinds of official speakers and, you know, that kind of thing. Publications, we got the Carabinieri on horseback. The helium was calculated to lift this scrim off the horse when the guy ropes were cut. So they round up Charlie Dent's nieces and nephews to cut the string, and then that would lift it off and unveil the horse. There was much negotiation with the Italians over this date, by the way. I do not want to insult anyone's Italian heritage in this room, but it's real difficult to get people in Italy to work on time and on schedule. It really is. It's really hard. And we kept saying 10th of September, 10th of September. It can't be on the 11th of September. And the reason is the army that came through and destroyed Leonardo's horse came through on the 10th of September, 1499. So we wanted the 500th anniversary of the destruction of Leonardo's horse to be the unveiling of the new one. So we told them it can't be 500 years in 1 month. So you got to get the site ready, you got to get the concrete cast, you got to get At one point, they had a guy on a motorcycle with blueprints sticking out of saddlebags, driving all over the city, getting official stamps, all this red tape and official stamps. He was going from office to office to office while the mayor and the assessori were on the phone saying, I don't want to hear any argument, stamp it, sign your name, and let it go, because it has to get done by the 10th of September. So that's the only thing we're convinced, that's the only thing that got it done on time. We had an absolute date, because even they can understand you can't have 500 years in a month and a half, It just doesn't sound right. So we had a great celebration, we unveiled the horse. The sun, unfortunately, hit the camera lens on that. It's not the best shot, but you get some idea. There was a rousing cheer.
Wow.
There it is on its Carrera marble statue. This is actually the back of grandstands constructed for the racetrack, but they're no longer used. And it's 1920s, it's called Liberty style architecture. And it's a very pretty cultural park. It's actually really very fitting for the horse. I'm probably leaving all kinds of stuff out from the story, but we had a great celebration. We had fireworks one night, 3,000 people came. We opened up the gates on Saturday morning for everyone to come, and thousands of people came to see the unveiling, to see the horse after it had been unveiled.
What
So
do
it was,
what do you call it?
what do we call it?
Yeah.
We don't, well, you can call it Il Cavallo, which is what Leonardo's horse was called. It has no name, it's just Leonardo's horse. There's a little plaque that explains about Charlie Dent. There's a little plaque that explains about Nina Akamu, the sculptor. And a set of plaques have been cast with all the donors' names in that are supposed to go on a brick wall that surrounds the inner part of this. Believe it or not, they were stolen. At great expense, we produced a series of 12 bronze plaques with everyone's name on. They got stolen. So we're going to have to arrange with Italy to have those remade, because they're supposed to be there permanently. We promised people, you donate to this horse, your name's going to be on over there. We even created, you're not going to believe this, a 15-inch model for the blind. Put it on a pedestal. The Blind Association of Italy came in, they brought all their folks, they touched the horse, and were able to experience it, hear the story. 3 weeks later, it was stolen. Somebody scaled the wall, came down and used a cordless power hacksaw, sawed it off and stole it. So it's a little tough place over there,
Yeah.
But this horse is truly that was the fireworks night. That was really fun. Up in here, lost my little button here. Up on this second floor, you could go through and see 54 photographs enlarged to this size that tell the entire story of the horse and its foundry production and everything else. So you could really learn how the horse was made by touring this photography exhibit. These are some of the folks that made it possible. Awful lot. There's a lot of Charlie Dent's relatives. There's board members here. Here's Peter Dent, Charlie's nephew. Here's Captain Munger, who was Charlie's co-pilot when he used to fly, and he became involved in the horse after Charlie died. Here's the manager of the foundry. There's Nina Akamu, and because I'm short, that's all you can see in my head there, just that little tiny thing with the sunglasses. But I'm in the picture at least. It was fun. It was fun. Now, you might say, that doesn't look right. That's a duplicate 24-foot horse purchased by Meyer Sculpture Gardens in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They decided that they were creating a giant sculpture park, and the centerpiece of their park should be a 24-foot Leonardo horse. So we negotiated with them. Let's say they paid the price plus a substantial royalty, which then went to the expenses of our Milan horse. And in October of 99, October of 99, they unveiled their 24-foot horse, which was also built at Talex using the same molds. Then the molds were destroyed. There'll never be another 24-foot horse. That was part of our bargain. You will have the only other one in the world. And they elected to put it on the ground so that everyone can come up and touch the hoofs and walk around it and pet it and everything else. And most museums say, don't touch, you're going to ruin it. If people touch the same spot for 1,000 years, it'll rub a hole in the bronze. And the Meyer folks said, we don't care if they rub the patina off, we'll put it back on. If they rub a hole in it, we'll weld it shut. We just want people to experience the horse on the ground. And I thought that was a great idea. And it's in this giant grass bowl So you can sit up here all the way around and look in on the horse, or you can walk up. And of course, the first day they unveiled it, little kids ran underneath the upraised horse, laid on the ground as if they're being crushed by the hoof, and had their mom take a picture. It was great. It was great. So you can, if you can't fly to Italy to see a Leonardo horse, you can go to Grand Rapids, Michigan, the Meyer Sculpture Gardens, and experience the same thing.
Fantastic. That is fantastic, yeah.
Here's an 8-foot horse in Vivci. Through some elaborate negotiations with the mayor of Vivci, he decided that he thought it would be appropriate to have an 8-foot horse in Vivci to honor Leonardo. So we raised some additional funds, created an 8-foot horse, and unveiled it in a little Piazza Charles Dent. They actually renamed the Piazza after Charlie. And that's Peter Dent, Charlie's nephew, and his wife Kathleen, a day after the unveiling, which unfortunately took place over 9/11 and trapped about 40 of our folks over there. Remember, the planes didn't fly for a long time? Our guys were stuck over there, and a bunch of people that were ready to go couldn't get there. But nevertheless, it got done. They cleaned the place up, put in new lighting, new plantings, and now you can go to Vivci and you can see a Leonardo horse right there too. It's funny, when I was over there, I would say Leonardo da Vinci, and the Italian would go, Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci. They're trying to get me to pronounce it correctly, you know. I never did quite get it, but now, if you really want to take a short trip, go to Allentown. This is the Baum School of Art. Across the street over here is the Allentown Art Museum, and there's a 12-foot copy, half size, of the horse. Charlie was born and raised in Allentown. We talked with the Baum School and the city of Allentown, and we said we want to honor Charlie by putting a horse in Allentown. We raised the money again, built a 12-foot horse, and you can see by the children it's very popular.
Yeah.
So you can just drive up into Allentown anytime and see this beautiful half scale. Just remember, when you're looking at it, imagine it twice its height for Italy. And of course, they had a celebration there too. I mean, we're really fond of celebrations.
Party crew, huh?
Yeah, I guess. And I like to end with, there's Charlie Dent. There's one of his early models that he did in clay. Here's a 22-foot horse he painted on his barn to see how big the horse would be, and he signed it Leonardo. But Charlie was a great guy, absolutely unique individual, and only someone with his perseverance could have pulled this project off. So I've probably run way late, but I'll take any questions that you have. Hope you enjoyed the story of the horse.
That was very good.
I'm sure we're really running late, aren't we?
No, you're fine.
Oh, okay,
You're fine.
well then fire away. Questions.
Yeah, any questions?
I probably left a lot out because I was trying to move it along. So, you want lights? Oh my goodness, he wants lights. I don't need light. Oh, I did forget one thing. People always say, how much did it cost? It took 21 years to finish this project from 1978 to 1999. And Charlie's record keeping early on was very sporadic, to say the least. But then we got a business manager and nailed everything down. The best we can come up with is $6.1 million over 21 years. And some of that money was spent on the dome, actually, not the horse. So that's a price of 5 cruise missiles. So, you know, it's not that bad. Instead of sending cruise missiles to Libya, we build a horse, you know.
Hopefully that'll last a lot longer.
That'll last a lot longer is right, yeah. We even left a fund over there of $25,000, I think it is, from which, as an endowment, and they tap money off once a year to clean the horse and re-wax it. Because all of Italy, but Milan in particular, have problems caring for their outdoor works because there's far more works than they have money for. So they tend to get weathered really bad, corroded from air pollution and everything else. So we left a fund there. Once a year, you guys have to go clean your horse and re-wax it. And if you do that, that bronze just stays, that is just forever, you know.
Good. That's interesting.
Yes, sir.
Share with the audience the story you told me of your special celebration at La Scala.
Oh.
It's a very good story.
The night before we unveiled the horse, we had a concert at La Scala Opera House in honor of the horse. And the way that came about is Charlie and Roger Enlow, his brother-in-law, who was the president of this group eventually, every 3 or 4 years they'd travel to Milan, do a whole bunch of meetings, let everybody know we're still working on this horse. The basic attitude of the Italians was, yeah, a bunch of crazy Americans say they're going to bring a horse over, I don't know. Yeah. But finally, as it got closer to the horse being constructed, we got more serious with them, and they got more serious about, well, I guess do you want it? Yeah, well, then you have to find a place for it, etc. Third visit to La Scala, I had the honor of meeting the director. Roger and I met the director, Dr. Clune. Roger arranged the appointment. We come in this great big boardroom of 450-year-old antique chairs and tables and carvings and ivory inlays, and I'm afraid to sit on the chairs, you know. But we met with the director. We showed him the front page of the New York Times. We showed him photographs of the horse being made. We said, we're working with the mayor and the assessori. It's coming. It's not a pipe dream. Could we do something at La Scala? We had originally thought it'd be neat to commission an opera telling the story of Leonardo and his horse, but there wasn't enough time for that. So we said, how about a concert by the house orchestra? And we're talking, and then all of a sudden he says, excuse me, gentlemen, his English is very good, gets up and walks out. And Roger and I look at each other, and as I was telling Eugene there, we had just assumed we'd committed some faux pas. Did we say something wrong? He just left, you know? And we sat there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and we're sweating. I mean, what did we do wrong? The guy just left. He comes walking back in the door with a great big smile on his face and says, I just got off the phone with Maestro Muti. He will fly from Germany to Milan and conduct a concert in honor of the horse. So, you know, so we had the most unbelievable concert. We were the guests of honor at La Scala. We watched Riccardo Muti conduct. It was fantastic. And then the night of the unveiling, there's a castle there that hardly ever gets used for the public, but somehow through connections and more connections, they opened up this castle, and we had a sit-down dinner at midnight, because that's when the Italians eat really late. I mean, we started around 9:30 or 10, and we finished up at midnight or 1, but that was really fantastic. A lot of the Americans who had come over had helped fund this thing. In fact, we had, out of the 1,200 people in the audience for the unveiling, 750 of them were Americans that flew over to see where their money went. They just had, and then we had tours of the Last Supper and Bergamo and the museums, and you know, we organized all these tours because, hey, you're going to be over there, you might as well enjoy yourself. But 750 Americans flew for that unveiling. A lot of Charlie's relatives, a lot of people from Allentown, Lehigh Valley area. But we had gotten donations, all 50 states and 6 foreign countries. All 50 states and 6 foreign countries gave us the money to finish that horse. No tax money, no government money. It's 501c3 nonprofit. It was all for the love of Italy and the Renaissance and Leonardo and the horse. So we were kind of proud of that we got it done that way.
Any other questions?
Oh, come on, you must have more questions.
How many horses in total then? I know one in Milan, one in Minnesota.
Well, here there's the Milan 24-footer. There's the Michigan 24-footer. Michigan also owns an 8-footer, which they use for educational purposes. And there's the 8-footer in Vivci. And there's a 12-footer in Allentown. And available for purchase are horses from the foundry, 10-inch, 15-inch, 3-footers, and 8-footers can still be made for anyone who wants one. Like we almost sold an 8-footer to a horse park down in Kentucky, but then they decided not to. But you know, if some library wanted a horse out front or somebody, and then a number of people bought the 10-inchers to put on their mantle and say, hey, I helped make that horse in Italy, you know. So those are still available and can be ordered from the foundry, but there cannot be another 24-footer. The funny thing is, I took an art group out to see Charlie's art collection and the horse. He told the story of his art collecting. He told the story of the horse. He asked for volunteers. He said, I need somebody to do some writing, do the newsletter, contact the press. I said, I'm an English teacher. I can do that. I volunteered and I was there for 13 years. I thought it was going to be, a year or something like
Yeah.
that. 13 years later, we got the horse to Italy. But at least I got to work with Charlie for 4 years before he died, which was really great.
Fascinating.
Thank you very much.
It is fascinating.
Sure.
So I want to thank Kristen and Skip again, and thank you all for coming. And if you're not yet a member and you really like what we do, please pick up a membership packet. And you now have a hat appearing. Will you do the honors and pick our, whoops, some people lost.
Yeah, we said two gentlemen. I think the Franklin, the workshop is
Give it to you guys, got one.
Exhibit.
It is Jack Martin.
When are we going?
Yeah.
All right, I got it, I'll go.
Do I get a horse?
Well, it's always interesting. Thank you very much for coming tonight. It's always interesting to hear about Lukens Steel and the connections.
Yeah.
Whether it be tugboats in San Francisco's Space Needle, the World Trade Center, or America's Cup boats. And you're like, Leonardo and Lukens, how does this happen? And I think it's a fascinating project, and I really want to thank Kristen for coming out and talking about the Franklin Institute and the Leonardo exhibit. Even if you didn't win tickets tonight, I encourage you to go. It's very interesting, and take someone with you. Hopefully you can inspire someone young or old. And then also want to thank Skip very much. I missed you the Monday that you came out and talked to the group, and I thought that was very informative, and we got some research there, and just your involvement in this and willingness to share this story about the connection and completing the vision some 500 years later. So again, thank you for coming.
You know what? Can I interrupt for 1 minute?
Sure,
I want
yeah.
to give you something. We had special medallions cast honoring Charlie. He collected bronze medallions from the Renaissance and other times, so we commissioned a medallion, which is very hard to get out of these little boxes. Hold on a minute. It has Charlie and the horse on one side, and his drawing, and it has Leonardo horse. It says Milan, 1999. So I'd like to give this to the Lukens Institute, or if I have the name right. But anyway, that will represent the Lukens Steel inside the
Great.
horse.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's very neat. Well, I know we have some friends of Charlie's tonight, so it sometimes takes a passion, vision to get things moving. So again, thank you very much. But we'll try and you hear about the models, and my Gene's still here. He's the treasurer, but it'd be interesting to get pricing for those horses.
I can give you that. I can give you that.
Yeah, because that'd be curious. And again, the tie and the connection between Coatesville and various places around the world, and again, as we do more programming, get more people here, can build that story a little bit. So thank you very much for this, and thank you so much for coming today, Leonardo. Our next lecture is it's in June 2nd. It's about life at Lukens, and we're going to have a round table of a couple people who are going to share some of their experiences and stories without trying to throw anybody under the bus. So should be interesting and getting a little bit of flavor from a cross section of people. That's June 2nd, and just keep posted on our website for other exciting things. But thank you very much for coming tonight. Go visit the Franklin Institute or Milan or Michigan. Yeah, Michigan or Allentown. Allentown maybe.
There you go. Thank you.
Yes. It was between Kate
There you
and
go.
Nancy. Negotiations started. Now that one I